can do it, blah, blah, blah. And then I get there, I'm like, no, it's actually really expensive and it doesn't implement at all. Then I got to go back to the drawing board. Like, I can't keep forcing that, right? You know? So I think there's a balance, right? There's some things that you kind of have to know, you know, when to pull your chips out and when to push them all back in and kind of play that. And I think that's the overall risk that you have to be comfortable with anytime you want to, you know, kind of, especially venture out on your own. But I don't think it's any different than even if working at a company. Like, sometimes you got to take that risk and like, I'm going to go work on this project, or I'm going to go do something that maybe isn't in your job description, but it all of a sudden gives you an opportunity.
Yeah.
Like,
you kind of make those doors open for yourself.
Yeah.
With your idea being implemented over the course of the year and since you started the business, have you gotten any new insights on water and conservation and things, like maybe not statistics, but an idea on something that, like you said, people don't think about water as a commodity. They're just, it's here.
I think one of the first things that I researched and one of the first pieces of data that really kind of opened my eyes to the problem, right? And to the real problem that I wanted to solve, right? So the overall picture, like, I want to save water, right? That's the problem I want to solve. But I read the statistic, the EPA estimates that 1 trillion gallons of water is wasted every year to household leaks. And that's a lot of water. That's enough water for like Miami, LA, Chicago, like all these cities combined for a period of time. And then I kind of like researched a little bit more, and what you really find is about 10% of households in America today, right? So about 12 point some odd million households in America today have a leak that wastes 90 gallons or more per day.
I did read, I was looking at the EPA website.
Right. And so now all of a sudden, when you calculate that out, you see that about 10% of the homes are wasting about 400 plus billion gallons of water, right? So it's like that 80-20 rule, right? Like 20% of the homes are wasting 80% of the water. And that was kind of like where that was a statistic that like opened my eyes to like, holy crap, like this is a big problem, because the person who doesn't care is wasting a lot of water and the rest of us are paying for it, right? And if you live in an apartment complex, if you know, or like own a hotel or something like that, like this problem magnifies because you have people that don't care and water is just going out of their toilet. And because it doesn't cause any damage, right? And because they're not paying a water bill, they're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And so though that statistic originally like really kind of opened my eyes to like the problem. And then you do some more research, and then you kind of see like, you know, the average toilet in America is replaced every 30 years. And that almost 60% of households have their original toilet installed. And it makes sense, right? Because a toilet doesn't go bad. It's porcelain. It kind of just sits there or whatever. But it has these parts that go bad. And the parts go bad because you have, you know, tap water that has chlorine and calcium and other just contaminants in there just naturally, because that's how they process
it. They corrode the parts and
exactly.
start leaking and stuff like that.
And then you have these plastic parts that are submerged in that all the time, right? And so if you've ever worked on a car or anything else, you know, water and these like things that are submerged in water generally don't do as well as things that are not, right?
What's crazy is since our conversation when we first met, I kind of try to make a conscious effort to stop running the water when I'm brushing my teeth.
Yeah, exactly.
And take maybe a little bit quicker showers.
Yeah.
And it's funny because while doing research for this podcast, again, on the EPA website, I was looking, and you can break those statistics and those numbers that you were saying about trillions or billions of gallons of water being wasted. It's like the average person for 1 hour, however much energy that uses, because we have water energy and things like that, can power a 60-watt light bulb for 2 days or something like that.
Exactly. I went to Helix Water, the Helix Water Authority out here in Lakeside. So they're like the major water distribution point for a lot of East San Diego. Okay. And they were saying that they spend more money distributing water than the actual cost of the water itself, meaning to pump it from this storage facility, you know, this reservoir to your faucet, the amount of energy it takes, right? Because you got to keep running pumps and pump it up and down and whatever. And that's kind of, again, where some of these statistics, it's like, it's not just water that we're wasting, right? We're pumping that water, we're heating that water sometimes. And I think part of this new wave of IoT devices, right? Internet of Things devices, And that's kind of what Water Vault falls into, right? This IoT device is, we now have a lot more data in front of us that we can use to start making better decisions, right? So one of the things that we always kind of work with our clients on is, yes, you can detect water leaks, and that's very important. But the data that we collect can now help you do a lot of other stuff that can help you save more resources and more money down the road, right? You may, we had a client that we were talking about, oh, we're just going to replace all of our toilets. And I'm like, yeah, you can replace 100 toilets at, a couple $100 a piece. And yeah, you're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars in capital expenditure in the beginning to do this. Or you can get our device and we'll tell you which toilets get the most use. So go replace the 5 that are used all the time, right? Don't replace the one that's used once a day. Like, you're probably not going to make your money back there. And we're not going to save as much water. And so I think that's kind of where a lot of the data that we collect here becomes really important. And I think just changes the problem. And I think that's to your point as well, right? You brush your teeth, you turn the water off because now you're aware of
the waste.
The waste.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what our device helps, is just to make you aware of the waste happening. Ultimately, it's still up to the customer to decide. Right. If you don't want to fix your toilet, no, we can't force you to fix it. All we're doing is we're giving you data that says, hey, looks like you have a problem. You should probably take a look at it.
What do you think might be a solution for long-term, like ending waste? I know that's a huge problem that it's definitely.
I think solution. if we really wanted to curb water waste specifically, I think it has to get significantly more expensive.
Yeah,
like water is it's really cheap. It's like less than a penny a gallon right now.
Oh wow!
And for that reason, people just don't
think about it.
They don't think about it, right? And it's when you're, like I said, when your water bill comes back and it's 3x what it normally is, and you're like,
well, it's like the gas tax.
Yeah, same thing
in California. Everybody's complaining about how high the prices are. Well, I mean, if we're trying to do something, like what I do love about California is, as hippie as people might call it, they're really concerned about climate change, or just helping the environment, period. Reducing emissions. We have the smog test, all those things. So you got this gas tax hiking up the prices of gas. If you don't like it, get a cleaner source of energy that your vehicle can run on.
Or you start using public transportation, or start I know a lot of my friends now, they're kind of like, if the opportunity arises, work from home or things like that, right? So that you're not and I think that's just the way it works, right? As things get more expensive, then we try to figure out ways to solve that, right? We had the same thing. That's why solar came up, right? Solar came up when energy got to the point where, like, you know what? It makes sense now as an investment. And I think ultimately, back to something we were talking about earlier, is the finances have to make sense in order for the innovation to kind of follow. Like, we were always told at Apple, we're like, if you can make the iPhone levitate, great. If it costs so much that nobody could buy it, then it doesn't matter, right? We have to still build technology that people can afford. And so that's kind of, I think, this underlying problem. And so if we really want to conserve, I think things have to get a little bit more expensive. I think things have to get a little bit more insight into how much waste is really happening. I think, for you, right, if you say, hey, I cut my shower by 1 or 2 minutes, I cut my, I turn my faucet off, this many minutes here, this many minutes there, and you start putting together a number, and you're like, oh, I'm actually saving an extra 1,000 gallons a month by doing this, right? And then that can help you be more aware of the problem, and then hopefully you start making decisions that can fix that problem, right? And I think ultimately the final implementation has to come from the end user, right? You can do everything you want, but the end user, if they're still going to waste water, they're going to waste water, right? And so we have to do a better job of just letting people know that this problem exists. I think a lot of people take it for granted because they just think you turn the faucet on, water comes out. I've never seen anything else. And if you've lived in California for the majority of your life, or lived in any kind of in America and not any other kind of third world country or anything, then you've never had that experience of, I turn my water on and it comes on.
Yeah, and it's crazy because being in California with how dry it is, up until a couple years ago, we were constantly in a drought. Yeah. We have that. It barely ever rains here.
Yeah, in February of 2018, almost 40% of Americans were living in some level of a drought condition. Right. Yeah. I mean, California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. I mean, even places like Colorado, Utah, right, where you think they get a lot of snow, they still deal with drought.
And even then, I'm sure people are still wasting water. If there wasn't a drought going on, and it just blows my mind because I'm from the East Coast, so we have our seasons and it rains a lot. Coming over here, Mission Valley, we get flooded like every year. It's like they don't have a really good irrigation system to get all that excess water out, but at the same time, we're constantly in a drought.
Yeah, and I think just again, California's a desert. Yeah, I mean, we're not. A lot of us, San Diego, if it wasn't for the mountains to the east of us, we would be in the ocean to the west of us, right? We'd be very similar to Arizona, right? We'd get these like 120-degree summers. Like we don't get that, and people kind of forget that we live in a desert, but we're not built for the trees and all this like lush stuff that we have around. And I think, again, awareness, right? And I see like now, I see a lot more, drought tolerant plants. Right. And I think that's like another thing that we start seeing more of, right? People are not putting these succulents. Exactly. They're not putting these like super high water usage plants. They're putting more like native plants, which are succulents and, cacti, whatever, right? Yeah. So like you're putting that kind of stuff in. But I don't know. I don't think the problem ever solves. I think it gets expensive and then we figure out a new solution because a new solution becomes profitable. And I think that's unfortunately kind of how it ends up working all the time. We'll see as water gets more expensive, then all of a sudden solutions like desalination will come online, right? Where we all of a sudden can take ocean water, take the salt out of it.
And the technology for that is super expensive right now.
Right now it's really expensive. It's really expensive to the energy required to take the salt out of the water, right? To take it to a level that you could drink it, right? It becomes really expensive. And so...
Because that's mainly the problem as far as when it comes to water. It's not like we don't have enough. We don't have enough consumable water.
Exactly. And I think that's another statistic that I read early on that kind of opened my eyes too, right? A lot of people, 70% of the earth is water. Sure. But that's all oceans, right? And then when we look at, the water that's fresh, it's like 1 or 2%. But then a lot of that is actually in ice caps. So if those melt, we have other problems on our hands, right? So now we have like lakes and some rivers and things like that, and when you drill down to it, it's like less than 1%, or like something percent of the water that's available is actually resource that we could use.
And it goes back to my point with the whole getting companies to make a conscious effort to help the environment, because it's not like we can't do it. It's not like our government can't do it, because I remember a couple months ago I went to Vegas with my wife and my mom and my aunt, and we visited the Hoover Dam. And they showed us the history on how it was made and everything. And it was like in like a huge economic crash, a war was going on, and people were still doing what, like, this huge push to make a dam come, and that dam powers what? Vegas. It powers some of California, and whatever surrounding areas that is. And it's like, if that's not the perfect example of what we can do as a society to help generate, income and energy and just a cleaner source of energy, what are we doing? Like, why? It's not like the technology doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's just the technology is not profitable.
Yeah.
Right? That's really what it comes down to, unfortunately. And a lot of the major innovation that happens, like you really need the big companies, for instance, to start investing in like PhD students who are doing research in like new, battery technology or new energy technology or water desalination technology. And it's as those guys just need money. They need, education needs always like grants and stuff to do this. So unfortunately, you don't get that investment until like it's getting to the point where the return on the investment for the investor is there, right? And that's kind of it's an unfortunate byproduct of living where we do. But at the same time, if things get bad enough, a solution usually comes up
for sure,
because
out
it's
of necessity. Yeah. Is there? I know we were talking about the EPA. Have you worked at all with the EPA or?
Yeah, I've had some conversations with them, and they want to save water, right? And I think there are very defined ways that they look at this problem, and they say, look, if we can get everybody to change their toilets out to ultra low flow, this will help. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It will help, right? Because we will save water.